Good evening, I'm Peter Mansbridge, and this is The National.
I don't understand it really. I don't see why they'd do that.
Manchester's grief gives way to disbelief over leaks to U.S. media about the bombing investigation, and the British government is furious. After dressing down NATO leaders to pay more for their defense, the U.S. president is caught in an awkward moment. And it all starts tomorrow with the speeches. Then the votes are counted on Saturday, and by early that evening, the Conservatives will have a new leader. At Issue is here to set it all up. Plus, Rex is by as well. Manchester United on his mind. Manchester today remained a city of raids, forensic teams, and bomb scares. Investigators apprehended more suspects, while others traced the movements of the alleged bomber. Salman Abedi was a man on the move. In the days before the attack, there are reports he was in Libya, passed through Prague, Istanbul, Dusseldorf, and according to authorities in Libya, he called his mother to say the words, "Forgive me," just before the attack. Across the country, the threat level remains critical. Nala Ayed has more from a city where sighs of relief are scarce and grief is tinged with fear.
An already jittery city, once again on alert, after someone reported a suspicious package. Police and the Army bomb squad were called in. A false alarm in the end, but the fear still very real.
Oh, my stomach's in bits, shaking, my legs are weak. I'm just so scared.
Manchester, 3 days in, is still unsettled, preoccupied, especially with piecing together the who and the how of Monday's attack. Police say their search has netted key arrests and items, but didn't elaborate. Infuriating, then, the steady leak of details in what is a sensitive investigation.
There is a live investigation taking place. We cannot have information being put in the public domain that's not in the direct control of the British police and security services.
It prompted Manchester police to stop sharing information with the US. The leaks have directly affected grieving families, says the chief constable.
It is absolutely understandable the distress and upset that this caused to those families who are already suffering, as everyone can imagine.
Some only now come to the arena to face that loss, to leave something behind of their sorrow. Only now can some of the injured face up to what happened that night. Laura Anderson suffered shrapnel wounds.
I could just see everyone rushing around me. I think I was screaming. I felt pain in my legs then, I think.
So Millie, your legs got hurt, didn't they?
Yeah, your legs.
Yes.
To share the pain, the Queen visited the Children's Hospital here to hear stories of survivors.
I hope it won't take too long for you to mend. Well,
very scary.
Thing. Very wicked.
A royal gesture, deeply appreciated here. Across the UK, people gathered for solidarity and a moment's silence. At a small concert in Manchester, tonight for some was about ending the silence and hearing the music again.
We didn't want anything really to stop us from going out and doing what we'd normally do.
Manchester's responded as it will do. It's a fantastic city. It's very strong.
3 days in, Manchester is subdued, but it plays on. Nala Ayed, CBC News, Manchester.
The investigation has moved fast, but as you heard, also lightning fast are the leaks, particularly to the U.S. media. Today, anger over them put a strain on one of the world's most important intelligence alliances. Susan Ormiston, 'Ormiston' has more. 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 'Ormiston' has more
The frustration of Manchester police, unable to control what leaked out of its investigation, blew up into a diplomatic squall. The UK and US share intel all the time, and at NATO meetings in Brussels, the UK Prime Minister backed up her police force with a strong rebuke.
I will be making clear to President Trump today that intelligence that is shared between law enforcement agencies must remain secure.
The alleged breach comes at a politically sensitive time. Prime Minister May is waging an election campaign, and President Trump, at his first NATO showing, is already on a warpath about leaks at home. He promised to get to the bottom of this with a review in the Justice Department and possible prosecution of those responsible. The New York Times defended its reporting, which included forensic images and specific details on where the bomber attacked based on where his body was thrown. The Times said the images themselves are neither graphic nor disrespectful and consistent with previous reporting on weapons in horrific crimes. But Manchester police said the details spilling out too early in an investigation could jeopardize collecting more evidence, although they didn't provide any examples of how that hindered this case. Police stopped the flow of intelligence in protest till late today. This former MI5 counterterrorism agent said that couldn't last.
We get more intelligence from the US than they get from us. This is an individual within the US who's made a mistake, seen something that he thought was interesting that perhaps someone he knows in the press thought was interesting, passed it on to them, they've then published it. Come on, let's get over it.
Canada shares intel as part of the Five Eyes group. Prime Minister Trudeau wouldn't comment directly on the leaks, but he said this country depends on the same kind of collaboration.
We will continue to work with all our allies to keep Canadians and all citizens around the world as safe as we can.
Tonight, that intelligence sharing is back on track after Britain's top counterterrorism officer said he had received fresh assurances from the Americans. And the U.S. is dispatching its top diplomat, Rex Tillerson, here to London tomorrow in an expression, quote, of U.S.-UK solidarity, and no doubt to shore up that sensitive relationship between these intelligence agencies. Susan Ormison, CBC News, London.
Intelligence was just one touchy topic at the NATO summit. The cost of security was another. Donald Trump repeated his criticism that the U.S. pays more than its fair share. In the past, he's even made threats about leaving the alliance. So how did Trump's debut go over? Ellen Morrow reports from Washington.
In action here, pushing aside another leader to get himself to the front of the group, and in words,
"This is not fair to the people and taxpayers of the United States."
Donald Trump made his presence strongly felt at his first NATO summit, arriving with a familiar demand.
NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations.
For many NATO partners, it was their first chance to see the new president in action after a campaign where he repeatedly took aim at the military alliance.
NATO is obsolete. It was 67 years, or it's over 60 years old.
The countries we are defending must pay for the cost of this defense. And if not, the U.S. must be prepared to let these countries defend themselves.
Today, Trump tried some diplomacy.
I'm honored to be here with members of an alliance that has promoted safety and peace across the world.
But he didn't publicly affirm his commitment to Article 5, the principle that an attack on one member is an attack on all, a particular concern for NATO's eastern members worried about Russia.
Is going to be a problem. So both what they heard and what they didn't hear was not a good day for U.S.-European relations.
Article 5 has only been invoked once after 9/11. A memorial to that tragedy was unveiled today. Still, in a press conference dominated by questions about Trump, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says he's confident of the president's support.
He and the United States is clearly committed to NATO, and it's no way possible to be committed to NATO without being committed to Article 5.
Though Trump didn't explicitly affirm a commitment to Article 5 during his speech, he did say he supports it later at dinner with NATO leaders. That's according to Prime Minister Trudeau's communications director. No doubt welcome reassurance for the alliance. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
As Trump called on the other 27 NATO countries to cough up more cash, how did Canada respond? David Cochran has that part of the story from Belgium.
If NATO leaders were hoping Canada would come to this summit and announce a big boost in military spending, they are going to leave Brussels disappointed. The Prime Minister's consistent message is that Canada is pulling its weight, even if it isn't spending the cash.
Canada is a strong partner in NATO in many different ways.
It means that Trudeau came to a NATO summit on burden sharing with nothing new to offer, except for an argument that Canada's efforts are worth more than the money it spends. Trudeau points to Canada's role in past NATO deployments and its upcoming leadership of a battle group in Latvia that will act as a tripwire against Russian aggression.
Canada is one of the go-to countries that the NATO alliance knows it can count on.
The stakes are high. This is about our security in a more uncertain world.
But NATO isn't just asking its members to do more, it's asking them to spend more. 2% of GDP on defense is the target. And by that standard, Canada isn't spending enough. At about 1% of GDP, it's only halfway there. Trudeau says more money is coming, but Ottawa won't reveal its new defense policy until next month that will outline a plan for the military that spans decades.
We've taken the time needed to get this right because our men and women in uniform deserve nothing less.
But the question is whether it will make NATO or Trump happy. And to manage those concerns at this meeting, Canada has been sharing high-level details of its defense plan with its NATO allies in advance. So far, so good, but Canada's allies and Canadians won't know the precise details until June 7th. David Cochran, CBC News, Brussels.
Trump's revised travel ban took another hit today in a U.S. federal appeals court. He signed the first executive order in January, but when it did not stand up in court, he revised it. Today's ruling means the government cannot spend or suspend new visas for people living in 6 predominantly Muslim countries. The case is now headed to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's been a week of rampant speculation after the Washington Post revealed someone in Donald Trump's administration is under FBI scrutiny. Tonight, reports reveal who that is. Wherever Donald Trump goes, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is rarely far behind. Officially an advisor, Kushner has emerged as a key player in the White House. Multiple U.S. news outlets now say the FBI is looking into Kushner's meetings with Russians. It's still not known if he is an official target of the investigation or if any charges will be brought against him. The specter of Russian hackers causing online chaos seems to be everywhere, and a Canadian online watchdog group says that's for good reason. A new report from the University of Toronto's Citizen Lab points to a huge Russian operation. Phishing attacks, disinformation, a systematic effort to discredit anyone considered a threat to the Russian regime, including an American journalist whose life was turned upside down. Havard Gould has more on what Citizen Lab uncovered.
The team found so much more than they were looking for.
We discovered a vast cyber espionage campaign.
Researchers in Toronto had started with this man, David Satter, an American journalist who has produced books, articles, and documentaries critical of Russia.
The Russian regime is by its nature unstable.
Satter last year made a mistake. He clicked a fake security warning about his email account. His emails were hacked, taken, something that could happen to anybody. But what happened next doesn't. Emails and documents were changed, details taken out, others added. The report says in one particularly clear case, a document was modified to make Satter appear to be paying Russian journalists and anti-corruption activists to write stories critical of the Russian government.
Then some of it showed up on a pro-Russian hacktivist website called Cyber Berkut with tainted information that had been added or information that had been doctored and removed to make it appear as if Satter was part of a conspiracy, a CIA-backed conspiracy.
Satter helped the research team, turning over unaltered files so they could spot the changes.
Tainted leaks are very hard to verify when you have falsehoods planted in a forest of facts.
Satter, who has written extensively about the use of disinformation in Russia, says the tainted leaks that targeted him felt both familiar and new.
It's an escalation in keeping with the escalating possibilities that are provided by technology.
And Satter was not the only target. The team found a pattern, a wave of similar phishing attempts aimed at more than 200 people in 39 countries. Among them, activists, military officials, politicians, and journalists.
We don't have a smoking gun, but we have a lot of circumstantial evidence that points to Russia as the culprit.
But that's where the trail ended. A huge disinformation campaign, untraceable and easily repeatable. Howard Gould, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up, the regular Thursday night lineup. Andrew, Chantel, and Althea on the Conservatives. And then Rex on Manchester. And later, Canada's secret archive.
It's disheartening, it's appalling.
The hoard of history that researchers would love to see, but hasn't been made public. The talk ahead of a congressional by-election in Montana had been on whether voters would choose a candidate pushing the Trump agenda. But just before polls opened, it all took a bizarre turn into the realm of political WrestleMania, with the Republican frontrunner taking a hands-on approach to dealing with the media. Stephen D'Souza explains.
I'll stand up to the D.C. establishment and drain the swamp.
Republican candidate Greg Gianforte has made no secret he's a follower of Donald Trump. But last night, he may have taken Trump's war on the media too far. It happened at his campaign office. Ben Jacobs, an American reporter for the British newspaper The Guardian, attempted to ask Gianforte about his party's health care plan.
And we'll talk to you about that later.
Yeah, but there's not going to be time. I'm just curious if you have the
speak
right
with
now.
Shane, please.
But you don't.
Sick and tired of you guys. The last guy that came in here, you did the same thing. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. The last guy did the same thing. You were the Guardian?
Yes, and you just broke my glasses.
The last guy did the same damn thing.
You just body slammed me and broke my glasses. He seemed to just snap. It was not having asked a number of politicians a number of questions about policy. I've never had that reaction to a question about healthcare reform before.
Gianforte's camp disputed Jacobs' version of events. In a statement echoing Trump, they blamed aggressive behavior from a, quote, liberal journalist.
He was on top of me and wailing on me.
A Fox News reporter who witnessed what happened backed Jacobs, saying at no time did she see Jacobs show any form of physical aggression towards Gianforte. Gianforte was charged with misdemeanor assault. If convicted, he could face up to 6 months in jail. Gianforte was helped on the campaign trail by Vice President Mike Pence and Donald Trump Jr. Today, Republicans responded to the incident.
There's never a call for physical altercations. Should the gentleman apologize? Yeah, I think he should apologize.
Regardless of people's opinions now, many couldn't switch their vote, even if they wanted to.
Before this all happened, 250,000 of Montanans had already voted via absentee ballot. So a lot of people who were going to vote already voted.
3 of Montana's biggest newspapers took back their endorsements of Gianforte, one saying that he committed an act of terrible judgment that if it doesn't land him in jail, also shouldn't land him in Congress. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's Chief of Staff, Nigel Wright, is getting called out by the federal ethics watchdog. The long-awaited report says Wright broke multiple rules by personally giving Senator Mike Duffy $90,000 to repay his Senate expenses. Duffy was charged and cleared of accepting a bribe, while Wright was never charged with anything. In spite of the report's findings, he won't be sanctioned or face penalties. There's tension in Greece tonight after a bomb attack on a former prime minister in broad daylight. Police are investigating after an explosive package went off inside the car of Lucas Papadimos, who was not seriously injured. He briefly led the country about 5 years ago during the debt crisis. Greek police say they have intercepted a number of similar packages in the past few months. The start of the 2017 Atlantic hurricane season is just a week away, and it's expected to be a bad one. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration predicts as many as 17 named storms and up to 9 hurricanes, some of them severe due to factors like warmer ocean temperatures and a weak or non-existent El Nino. Straight ahead, the results of a clinical trial show real promise in treating a rare form of epilepsy. And the archive Canadian historians would love to see, but can't.
Fidel Castro, seen here with his brother Raul, has been a focal point of controversy ever since his barbudos, his bearded guerrillas, overthrew the Batista regime on New Year's Day this year. His executions of former enemies, his gentle handling of communists, his land reform program involving expropriation of large United States interests, all these things have kept him in the headlines. He was interviewed in Havana by CBC reporter Michael McClear.
Like in Canada, we find support too in the public opinion.
Last year, by far the sharpest thorn in the American side was Cuba. Raul Castro, the Minister of Defense, one of the most bitter enemies of the United States, his hatred of all things American surpassed only by that of his brother Fidel.
Do you think that Canada should continue to trade with Cuba despite the United States embargo on trade with that country?
I don't think we should let the United States decision not to trade with Cuba to influence us. I think we have to stick to the United States policy. I personally am against any trade with Cuba.
Pierre Trudeau was the first leader of a Western industrial nation to step on Cuban soil, to be greeted with a warm and friendly double handshake by Fidel Castro, since Castro came out of the mountains, leading a revolution that started turning Cuba into a communist state in 1959. At a quick news conference, Trudeau was asked if he was concerned about the people back home who were shocked by his presence in a communist state.
Well, the category of people which would be shocked by that have long since been shocked by my visit to China and to the Soviet Union, so I guess I can't worry about that.
The Prime Minister arrived. Fidel Castro was there to greet him with a tirade about the United States.
El bloqueo contra Cuba.
Castro said the blockade is a calumny. He said it's genocide. The Prime Minister made no direct response to him. In his brief remarks, he talked of a new awareness in Cuba.
An expression of confidence in the increasing openness of Cuba to the wider world.
Most of these people couldn't tell you the name of the Canadian Prime Minister, but they know about Canada. Canada figures high up in their hopes.
A 6-alarm fire burned for hours at a recycling plant along the Toronto waterfront. No one was injured and there were no hazardous materials at the location. The cause is under investigation. Roads are submerged and transit is delayed as Toronto grapples with more flooding. By early afternoon, Environment Canada says it recorded over 54 millimeters of rain on the Toronto Islands, an area of the city still recovering from the last rainfall. Look at that. It left carp swimming through their roadways. For years, parents have called attention to a marijuana compound called CBD. They say it helps reduce seizures in children with a rare form of epilepsy. And now a landmark clinical trial suggests they may be right. Our health reporter, Christine Birak, has that story.
There you go, you did it!
For years, the McKnight family has been trying to solve a bigger puzzle. 9-year-old Liam has Dravet syndrome, a rare form of epilepsy that can cause deadly seizures. While they're difficult to watch, Liam's mother wanted to share this video.
Once he was 3, the seizures ramped up and they were relentless. Cannabis, I would say, was probably our last hope.
They started giving Liam an oil containing cannabidiol, or CBD, mixed with a small amount of THC. Remarkably, most of Liam's seizures stopped. His doctors were impressed, but they wouldn't suggest dosage or even discuss this unproven treatment.
We've kind of been left on our own to try to figure this therapy out.
But a new study published in the New England Journal of Medicine may help them out. An industry-funded trial looking at 120 kids with Dravet syndrome found in the group treated with CBD, the number of severe seizures went from 12.4 to 5.9 a month. In the placebo group, about 15 to 14. For 3 CBD patients, seizures stopped completely, and 8 dropped out of the trial due to side effects.
So we did see more side effects in the CBD versus the placebo group. The most common ones were tiredness, decreased appetite, and weight loss.
CBD can also interact with other medications and may affect liver function.
So it's not a benign thing. It's also not a magic bullet. Most patients had a reduction in the most severe form of seizures, but they still had other forms of seizures.
Doctors also warn all the patients treated with CBD had significant learning and developmental disabilities. They don't know what effect it could have on someone who is higher functioning. The McKnights know the cannabis extract isn't a cure-all, but they hope this study will spur far more research.
We always said sometimes science doesn't always lead the way. Sometimes it has to catch up.
And there's still a long way to go. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
They called her Amazing Grace. A former British Columbia politician, Grace McCarthy, has died. At a time when many women found it hard to consider having a career, Grace McCarthy went from a flower shop owner to eventually a senior cabinet minister with the Social Credit Party. The 89-year-old died after a lengthy battle with a brain tumor. Lots more still ahead on tonight's program. At Issue, Rex, and then later.
The government seems to be, in essence, running some kind of a secret or shadow archive.
The stash of documents historians would love to see, but can't. First, let's look at the day's business numbers. The TSX dropped 8 points. The dollar inched up a little bit. In New York, the Dow gained 70 points. The price of oil fell $2.46 a barrel.
Pressure equipment of several hundred major operations must once more satisfy demanding production standards that bring to your home the beautiful world of color.
Well, by this time tomorrow night, we will be well into the speeches. And remember, there are 13 of them, so please be prepared. We're talking about the Conservative Leadership Convention, of course, and within 48 hours, the party will have a new leader. Andrew, Chantel, and Althea are all here in studio, ready to head to the convention floor tomorrow for all the weekend action. So we've been waiting, a long time, more than a year for this. There's been lots of things said about the Conservative process leading towards this new leader. I know none of you want to get into the prediction game, nor do I. But let's talk a little bit about the process. Was it all worth it, what the Conservatives have finally ended up with in this weekend?
I think so. I mean, there were a lot of complaints from people saying, there's too long, or there's too many candidates, or there were none of the big dogs running, and the process was impenetrable. I know all the complaints, but when you think of some of the things that have befallen parties in previous leadership races, there was no coronation, there was no terrible divisions in rancor and splits within the party. There were very little of the kind of shenanigans that the Conservatives particularly have had in some of their leadership races. And they've come out of it with a good, thorough airing of some of the different strands of opinion within the party, a good conversation about where the party wants to go. I think some candidates did better than others in terms of raising their profile, but they're going to come out of this also, I think, with quite an attractive front bench of presentable, responsible, realistic types of candidates. And I think it put aside some of the kind of nastiness and harshness that was associated with the previous Conservative government.
Wow, he sounds sold. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it's not to be a contrarian. I think one of the assets of this huge lineup is that it allowed the actual talent in the House of Commons to shine. So if you were to tell me that the front bench of the Conservative Party going forward is this lineup, this leadership lineup, I would feel a bit sad for them. Because a lot of their good MPs, who will be their front benchers, stayed in the House of Commons and did not run and showed themselves to be quite solid. People that were not really well known, Gérald Deltel, to name this MP from Quebec, but others. So yes, there's a decent mix. I think the main advantage of this overly long campaign, it could have been 6 months. And the result would have been achieved is that someone who came up with an idea that, the Kelly Leach test of values, the campaign was long enough to have the conversation and to have people think it through. What does it mean beyond the polls say, oh, this is a popular idea and it works for Trump. So I think the main advantage may have been that it spared them 2 major accidents, the Kelly Leach thing, which I don't think is going to be turn into leadership tomorrow, and Kevin O'Leary's running on his own hot air at some point.
Right. Well, his hot air will be sitting with us for the
yes,
weekend
that should be pleasant.
as he helps us on our analyst panel. Althea, you probably saw more of it than any of us, close up and in person. What did you make of the process?
Well, I feel in some ways, like both of these individuals, I do think that we got to see the different strands and the different clashes that exist within the Conservative Party. And it's going to be hard, especially if, Maxime Bernier, for example, is the leader on Saturday, to keep that caucus together and united. And to that point, because of Kevin O'Leary's entry into the contest in January and the fact that he basically sucked up all the oxygen until he left.
And he sucked it up even more of it when he left, yeah.
We haven't really given the now perceived frontrunners the type of scrutiny that you would expect to have in a leadership race like this. Like Maxime Bernier's platform hasn't been costed. The impacts of his policies have not been as thoroughly discussed as Kelly Leach's plan to screen newcomers, for example. And if the contest had been, 2 more months, maybe the frontrunners would be different.
Arguing for a longer campaign. Althea Raj. Listen.
Well, I'm not really. I'm just saying.
I know. Listen, the point's interesting, but I also find it interesting that you think they're going to, the potential exists for them to leave divided after this weekend.
I think that if Max Bernier is the leader, Sunday and Monday when he meets caucus is going to be very difficult for him. He has the backing of 7 members of parliament. Andrew Scheer and Erin O'Toole each, for example, have more than 30 members of parliament and senators backing them. He has very, very little caucus support, in part because it's his position on supply management. A lot of the rural MPs are very uncomfortable with that. Part of the reason is because he's not seen as a team player. He's kind of his lone wolf, does his own thing, says whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And a lot of conservatives tend to be more team player. They like to discuss things in caucus and have the show of unity when they come out. Max Bernier is not like that. So it's going to be a challenge for him to get all these people to buy into what he's selling. And it's going to be a challenge, I think, also a year from now at convention, if he's the leader, to get the membership to support the policies that he has championed, which most of the policy book is actually opposed.
The thing is that this is an MP who would come to the leadership not only with few friends in caucus, but with ideas that many in caucus believe could cost them their seats. So that's a pretty
Especially
lethal.
on the supply management front.
But also healthcare. And the notion that the Canada Health Act becomes inoperative under his proposal to just transfer the tax points to the provinces. There are many urban MPs in caucus who think, oof, do we really want to run on a platform like that? And there are a number of ideas that are a hard sell. So he is going to have to demonstrate different skills. I think he ran a very disciplined campaign and a very good campaign. Of all of them, his campaign, win or lose, was the most effective. But he's going to need a different skill set if he becomes the leader.
He's got the second campaign now to win over the party establishment. I mean, to some extent, this spaces any leader. They've got, you always have to mend fences. You always have to bring in the people you ran against. I agree that it's sharper in this case because his policies, in many cases, are an abrupt departure from some of the things the party has stood for in the past, although they are clearly small c conservative. So in a sense, he's calling the party to be truer to itself. But this is another example of the perils of having a leadership process where the leader is elected by an electoral college that then disappears for the most part the day he's elected. And then you have to deal with the caucus. In the traditional model, you have the caucus choose it, and you resolve those contradictions and those issues in the process of choosing a leader. He now has to go through all this again now to win over the party establishment.
Let me just show viewers something we showed them last night, but it's kind of a 30-second recap of how this weekend will unfold, and you got to kind of know this as you get ready for the weekend. Watch this. The convention is in Toronto, but almost all the voting will take place across the country. There are more than 250,000 eligible to vote. Probably around half will. 14 names are on the ballot, but one, Kevin O'Leary, has dropped out. Friday night is for speeches. Saturday, the winner is declared. Delegates have been voting for a couple of weeks already, listing their first, second, and so on choices. Voting stops Saturday at 4 p.m. Toronto time, and then the party will drag out announcing the results starting at 5 p.m. Will this be exciting? Could we be surprised? Let's find out. Okay, so it was a little longer than 30 seconds. What will you be looking for when you start to see numbers, aside from the obvious of who's in first place, how many votes have they got? What's critical for you? What will you be looking at, Althea?
Aside from who's leading? Well, how big the gap is between the first person and the second.
I mean, the assumption is, and you guys all kind of showed it earlier, that Bernier is going to be leading after the first ballot. That's the assumption.
That is the assumption.
Aside from that, what
well, who's next and how large that gap is? Mr. Bernier believes that if his voter turnout is higher than the average for the rest of the party, that he can easily reach that threshold. The other candidates, the sort of Andrew Scheer's and Aaron O'Toole's and Lisa Rates, they're basically going after the same vote. And it's unclear, I think, to everybody who those voters are going to rank first, second, third, fourth. And so that will really determine where the replacement is. And if that gap is very large, then it will be a lot harder for one of them to catch up.
Andrew, what are you watching?
People talk about sort of coming from behind scenarios. We've seen those in classic elections, conventions past, Joe Clark, Dalton McGuinty. This is not a delegated convention. It's a ranked ballot. It's going to be hard to orchestrate that kind of anybody but Bernier campaign as you might have in campaigns past. And of course, the other thing is that even if people are going to drop off and redistribute their ballots in each round as they do in this, there may not be second and third choices to redistribute if people only put their first choice. So, yeah, if Bernier's, above 30% and 6 or 8 points ahead of the next candidate, I think the sheer arithmetic, no pun intended, works in his favor. He's also got, I think, a sort of an enthusiasm gap that Althea alluded to, that I think his voters may be more motivated to come out and vote than for some of the other candidates.
Chantal?
I'm going to look for all those things, but I'm also, because those are two candidates that I don't believe will win, but that put propositions to the party that the party is also voting on. One of them is obviously Kelly Leitch. I want to see how far she gets within this party and this campaign with the kinds of proposals that she's made. And that would be, up to a point, a revisiting of the language on immigration and diversity that the party explored unsuccessfully, I would argue, in the last election. The other guy I'll be watching for the same reason, but for different policies, is Michael Chung. Yeah. Because he is the one who has spelled out a climate change policy that is not the party dogma. And it's almost a dogma. Anything that says carbon tax is bad, that is not his approach. He's the only one with that. There are blue conservatives, or green, call them what you want, green conservatives. They do exist. They're not in one region in particular. So I want to see how far he gets with that.
You know, at the end of the weekend, we'll probably be trying to decide whether we're looking at the same conservative party that we've been used to since Stephen Harper was elected. What do you think the chances are that we're going to see a different conservative party? Not just the fact the leader's different, but it's standing for something different.
I think there's a good chance of that in a couple of ways. The Harper mix, if you will, was relatively little ideological content, even for a guy who was known previously as an ideologue, and a lot of harsh partisanship. And I don't think there was, I think there was a relationship between the two. I think you may see a party that emerges from this that has reversed that, where there's much more policy substance. Maybe we're saying maybe too much for the public to swallow. We'll see. But with much less of that really harsh, negative, stridently partisan tone, and all of that went with it, the secrecy and the almost paranoia at times. So I think that's good. I think that's progress for the party and progress for Canadian politics.
Nelson?
I agree with all of that. I think that obviously if Mr. Bernier, who actually sees himself as like the vision of a new Reform Party leader, and much of his platform is actually almost word for word what was in the Reform Party platform from 1997, he represents a real break from the Stephen Harper era. I would have said that if Kevin O'Leary was still in the contest, that he would also represent a break from the Stephen Harper era. Lisa Raitt, Aaron O'Toole, Andrew Scheer, they are basically running on a sunnier, happier version of Stephen Harper's policies. There is very little that they are suggesting, actually nothing I can think of, that they are suggesting that could not have been in a policy in a Stephen Harper government. And I think regardless of who the leader is, it will be a friendlier, happier tone, because they have learned from Rona Ambrose, from Justin Trudeau in the last election, that they need to be more approachable and a kinder and gentler party.
Is there any evidence that Stephen Harper's hand is
out
there?
None whatsoever.
Fashion? No? You get the last word, Chantal.
I think that regardless of what we all say on Monday, issues shape leaders. And what happens between now and a year and a half is that the emerging issues of the elections will come to the fore. One of those, for instance, is how we deal with the U.S. That's going to become big. There was not a lot said about that issue in the campaign. The Conservatives so far have not broken ranks really with the Liberals. But the real defining issues of the next campaign for that leader, we will not see this weekend.
But what we will see this weekend is the beginning of painting of the landscape of what the campaign will look like in terms of the players and the parties. Just the beginning. The NDP's still got to go this fall. Thank you all for this. CBC News will have all the action from the Conservative Leadership Convention. Rosemary Barton will join us, along with At Issue, of course, will be there. Our main analysts, Peter MacKay, Michelle Rempel, and Kevin O'Leary. They'll all be part of our live coverage this Friday, tomorrow, and Saturday on CBC News Network, CBC Television, and online. All right, time to change the topic, and for that, we'll have Rex. Stay with us.
This is Niagara Falls, and if you've noticed a little more foam at its base lately, perhaps it's mainly because of the beer. Beer that's being dumped by the caseload into the custom shed washroom upriver at Fort Erie.
They are bringing more beer than usual on account of the beer strike in Ontario.
One Hamilton man who shuffled off to Buffalo to pick up a couple of six-packs got his comeuppance, but at least he, unlike many others, was able to kiss his beer goodbye.
A Canadian beer drinking tradition is disappearing fast, and the first place they're feeling it is in the Maritimes. What's vanishing are those squat and stubby dark brown bottles.
The Canadian brewery industry has spent millions of dollars to make the change to long-neck bottles, and part of that cost is a result of scenes like this. There's no doubt that Cape Bretoners have done their part to support the brewery industry, and some wonder why the beer couldn't have found its way to a charitable cause. It's a beer drinker's lament. 700 cases of supposedly good brew down the drain, so to speak.
Brewers say the change was inevitable. Light beer has become popular, and American beer and twist-off caps.
I find when you're drinking out of it that it foams up more.
But most beer drinkers have adjusted.
Oh, as long as the beer is still there.
Specialty brewers are on the hop these days, rushing to cash in on more relaxed liquor laws.
Now that Canadian liquor laws are changing, new breweries are springing up all over. There's one in the back of this pub in Kingston, Ontario. But the idea of drinking the stuff that's made in the back room is catching on.
It's got a hell of a lot more body than Canadian beer, I'll tell you that.
It's very smooth, it's very easy to drink.
Okay, Ernie, if you could picture yeast there.
Bernie Knudsen has been coming to this so-called U-Brew store for about 3 years. It's easy and it's cheap. Making your own beer and wine in British Columbia is virtually tax-free. You can brew a dozen bottles here for about $10. Buying it at the liquor store would cost $15.
For the working men, yes, it's a working people, the working class people, it's a way better deal.
Most hours have 60 minutes. This hour has 7 days. Tonight, Ralph Nader charges the Detroit car companies with running risks that can't hurt them, but do hurt us.
I could give an example of the Buick Roadmaster in 1953. The one with power brakes came onto the market, many thousands of them, with a defective braking system. Now,
You mean in the 53 Buick Roadmaster,
with power
a driver
brakes.
would literally go from normal brakes to no brakes like that?
Right, that's right. This is documented in court records, which is very interesting. It shows you that the only way we find out about these things is through the cumbrous process of the judicial system. So what you want to do is make an overwhelming systematic case to overcome the resistance of industry. The stronger a case you make, the more scientists you have working on the project on an independent, objective basis, the more overpowering the forces of humane automotive technology will be.
Outrageous and horrific deeds, frequently executed, over time have an insidious way of becoming familiar, of injecting themselves into our consciousness as a kind of norm. Canada recently, rightly, honored the young heroine Malala Yousufzai as close as this world is likely to get to seeing an angel of light and courage. She spoke and speaks against the Taliban and terror. She survived the bullet in the head these evil men delivered there for her efforts. She was a mere child of 14 during that murderous attempt. Malala is a singular human being. In 2015, 100 school children were killed in Pakistan. Now, we could see these young victims very easily as 100 Malalas who did not survive. And this week, far from Pakistan, but the same grim theme, at a pop concert in Manchester, ISIS terrorists detonated a nail bomb, killing 30, injuring at least 200. Teens and preteens, young girls the majority, and one as young as 8. Bloody violence by Islamic terrorists against innocents is a bitter commonplace of our time. And the frequency of these depraved and barbarous attacks have made them commonplace. Just since 2015, we've had close to a terrorist litany. Stockholm and the ISIS truck slaughter. London recently, another truck mowing down people on Westminster Bridge. In Berlin, 12 dead, 56 injured. In Normandy, the gruesome slitting of a priest's throat and hostages taken, ISIS again. In Germany, a machete attack on a pregnant woman. And going back before 2015, the even more extravagant attacks in Bali, 202 dead, Madrid, 192 dead, the Delhi bombings, 62 dead, the suicide bombings, plural, in London, England, 52 dead, Mumbai, 5 days of attacks, 162 dead, the Boston Marathon. All these and more alongside the dead, with huge numbers of injured and maimed. Terror repeated creates a repulsive paradox because each additional terrorist attack diminishes the shock, trims the memory of previous brutalities. What happens often blunts response. In turn, cities and countries fall back into a semi-ritual, a patterned response that begins to look like falling into an accommodation with these horrors as something to be lamented, but which we must come to expect, even perhaps accept. We gesture towards these outrages, offer hashtag solidarity. National leaders retreat into near boilerplate compassion. There are street rallies of sympathy and solidarity. But none of these adequate in either depth or power to the events they address. Gesture is an unconsciously camouflaged retreat. Where's the real resolve, a renovated sense of determination, an edge of justified anger over such callous, unjustifiable onslaughts? The response of Western governments to modern terror is incomplete, missing a commitment of absolute resolution and a manifestation of leadership equal to this horrible moment. And Malala earns honors and justified applause. What injustice she should be receiving is that the leaders of the world find the grit and means to make her fine example, finally, unnecessary. For The National, I'm Rex Murphy.
Reform's Chief of Policy, Steve Harper, previews a major theme of the weekend.
Reformers want a strong country built by those who want in, not by those who want out.
I guess in terms of the results in Calgary West tonight, there's only one thing I can say, along the lines of what Don Cherry always says, and that's
48,561, which is 55.04%.
This country needs a party dedicated not to worshiping or taking advantage of the system, but to reforming the system in this country to better serve the interests of ordinary, hard-working, common-sense Canadians.
Good evening. Stephen Harper and Peter MacKay were all smiles and handshakes today as they took the wraps off their historic deal to merge the Progressive Conservatives and the Canadian Alliance.
This division of Conservatives is ending. Our swords will henceforth be pointed at the Liberals, not at each other.
In the end, the campaign's frontrunner, the former leader of the Canadian Alliance, won the leadership on the first round of voting, denying Belinda Stronach and Tony Clement a second round to try to overtake him.
The tired, old, and corrupt Liberal Party is right now cornered like an angry rat.
We are saying it is going to be a Conservative minority government. You're looking at the 22nd Prime Minister of Canada.
Friends, I have never been so proud of our great country, and I am honored and overwhelmed to be asked to lead it.
Most hours have 60 minutes. This hour has 7 days. Tonight, Ralph Nader charges the Detroit car companies with running risks that can't hurt them, but do hurt us.
I could give an example of the Buick Roadmaster in 1953. The one with power brakes came onto the market, many thousands of them, with a defective braking system. Now,
you mean in the 53 Buick Roadmaster,
with power
a driver
brakes.
would literally go from normal brakes to no brakes like that?
Right, that's right. This is documented in court records, which is very interesting. It shows you that the only way we find out about these things is through the cumbrous process of the judicial system. So what you want to do is make an overwhelming systematic case to overcome the resistance of industry. The stronger a case you make, the more scientists you have working on the project on an independent, objective basis, the more overpowering the forces of humane automotive technology will be.
Well, as Canada celebrates its 150 years, historians are pushing for the public to have access to more of our past. A staggering amount of information is currently off limits and gathering dust. As Dave Seglins reports, there is a call for Canada to allocate some of the millions it's setting aside for celebrations to make that vital history public.
Welcome to Canada 150.
The government rang in 2017 with big plans to celebrate Canada's history. But behind the fireworks, there is growing frustration with how Ottawa is actually preserving the country's heritage.
It's disheartening, it's appalling.
Historian Dennis Molinaro is looking into the history of surveillance in Canada during the Cold War. RCMP wiretaps used to eavesdrop on Soviet spies. But key documents from the 1950s are inaccessible because they've never been transferred to the public archives. The government's told Molinaro it has at least 1.6 million pages of records from the era locked inside the Privy Council office.
The government seems to be, in essence, running some kind of a secret or shadow archive.
He says there's no way to know what the government is holding.
Think of how many events from the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, some even big events, but even small events, RCMP counterintelligence operations, foreign intelligence operations.
We asked various departments just how much material they have. Historical papers older than 30 years. Now that's the deadline for releasing records to the public in places like the UK. Turns out Canada is hoarding a ton. The Privy Council's archive is so big, its papers would stack almost as high as the CN Tower. Canada's electronic spy agency, about a quarter of that. National Defence, Global Affairs, wouldn't say. Molinaro and the Canadian Historical Association are demanding it all be transferred to public archives immediately. Their petition is being sponsored by MP Murray Rankin.
Historians have brought our history alive, and if they can't have access to the raw materials to do that, we are impoverished as a people.
These advocates are hoping that as Ottawa spends hundreds of millions to mark Canada 150, that they'll set aside some of that money to preserve history and open up the government's stockpile of records that's collecting dust behind closed doors. Dave Seglin, CBC News, Toronto.
That's The National this Thursday night. For news at any hour, you can always go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm Peter Mansbridge. Thanks for watching.